Late on the night of June 5, 1944, the German army headquarters in occupied France began to receive reports of enemy parachutists drifting from the sky and landing east of Caen, across a swath of northwestern France that included Coutances, Valognes, and Saint-Lô. Assuming that the parachutists signaled the first wave of a more massive push by the Allies, the Nazi brass ordered their 7th Army Unit to increase their numbers and be prepared for an all-out invasion. However, General Hans Speidel then decreased the level of alert once subsequent reports began to trickle in with a curious addendum. So far, all of the parachutists that had touched down had turned out to be cloth dummies. The Allies' top-secret Operation Fortitude was in full swing, and Germany was belatedly realizing that it had prepared to do battle with the world's largest phantom army, one that would never show up because it had never really existed at all. D-Day. Tuesday, June 6, 1944. It's a date etched in military history and one of the most crucial turning points in modern history. Operation Overlord was the name of the Allied invasion of Normandy that took on the might of Nazi Germany. The infamous Normandy landings themselves were codenamed Operation Neptune, but it's best remembered in the world's collective memory as D-Day. D-Day remains the largest seaborne invasion in military history. Although not an immediate success on the first day, the attack did eventually allow Allied forces to push into occupied France and go on to win the war on the Western Front. And how exactly was it possible for the Allies to land 156,000 soldiers on the shores of France and to essentially catch the occupying German forces by surprise? It was largely thanks to some crafty deception and brilliant subterfuge. Military fortitude, British style. With Britain so geographically close to France, the Germans obviously knew that at some stage the Allies would launch an invasion across the English Channel to mainland Europe. They simply didn't know how to pinpoint where the attack would land. That's how the British concocted their devious scheme to draw all attention away from northwestern Normandy. This deception plan for D-Day would be codenamed Operation Fortitude, which in turn was part of a broader overall deception strategy known as Operation Bodyguard. Fortitude was comprised of 2 parts, with the first being Fortitude North, which was meant to fool the Germans into thinking that the Allies would launch an attack on Nazi-occupied Norway. The second part was Fortitude South, which was concocted to convince the Germans that an invasion would occur in the Pas-de-Calais area of northeast Normandy. Pas-de-Calais seemed the obvious choice, as it's where England and France are closest in proximity. Various sub-operations also comprised Operation Fortitude, all adding to the subterfuge of misinformation. This web of operations and sub-operations were the brainchild of the British Intelligence Services, or MI6's 20 Committee. The principal means by which the Germans were duped during Operation Fortitude could be boiled down to 2 words: secrets and dummies. Secrets and lies. First, the secrets, by which the Allies deliberately let the Germans get hold of false secret information with spies and double agents, as well as via exchanges with neutral countries. The Allies were no doubt inspired by the words of the great Chinese strategist Sun Tzu, who said, "All warfare is based on deception." Double agents were instrumental in Operation Fortitude. They delivered false information to reinforce this deceit both before and after the Normandy landings. The 20 Committee referred to this as the double-cross system, whereby German intelligence agents in Britain were turned to work for MI6 in cooperation with the British Security Service, or MI5. One of the most famous of these agents was Juan Pujol Garcia, a native of Catalonia and a staunchly pro-British double agent. Nicknamed Garbo, and mostly based out of Lisbon, Portugal, which was a neutral country, Garcia created and oversaw a network of no less than 26 imaginary agents who were supposedly supplying him with information on Allied preparations. He would in turn pass on this false information to the Germans. Roger Hesketh, author of the book Fortitude, the D-Day Deception Plan, had this to say about the German spies in Britain in the lead-up to D-Day. Quote, "The spies that had been established in Britain had, without exception, fallen under the control of the security services MI5. Every agent that had been infiltrated into the country had been picked up, and in the counterintelligence argot, turned. The Allies knew that their secrets were working when a decrypted transmission between the Japanese ambassador to Berlin and Nazi Germany's high command recounted a conversation with Hitler, which revealed that the Germans indeed expected an Allied invasion via the Straits of Dover to the Pas-de-Calais region. And so a mock invasion was launched by the Allies from Dover on June 5th to give credibility to this myth, while the real invasion took place the next day. Many historians believe that Operation Fortitude was so successful because it was a closed-loop plan. The British controlled not only the information going forward to the Germans, but they were also able to verify the exact extent to which the Germans believed the false information they were being fed. This enviable advantage for the British was due to two factors. Firstly, as stated, the British had achieved complete control of all German agents in England by 1940. Secondly, the British were able to read encrypted German message traffic, often as quickly as the intended recipients themselves. MI6's 20 Committee made sure that the Nazi case officers of double agents were supplied with fabricated information, which was dutifully passed on to German Armed Forces High Command, known as the OKW. The 20 Committee did this by means of an impressive radio or wireless deception plan, by which the committee first fabricated information to be fed to the double agents and to the wireless deception units. The agents then passed the information to their German controllers, whose wireless units broadcast the lies across the OKW and German military intelligence, or Abwehr. The result was a system based on what was dubbed controlled leakage of information, which MI5 referred to as special means. The Germans even inadvertently helped British intelligence by providing their so-called Nazi agents with questionnaires. These questionnaires provided MI5 and MI6 with valuable information regarding future German operations, as well as whatever intelligence the Abwehr already had. This effort greatly aided British work in decrypting German secret codes. An almost comically fortuitous bonus for the British was that the payments the Abwehr was making to what it thought were German agents in England were instead often used to fund British intelligence efforts. The German intelligence system was notoriously convoluted, and with their deceptive operations, the 20 Committee was able to breach this maze of German operations by the use of intercepts of Nazi-coded messages, thanks to the famous breaking of the Nazis' Enigma coding machine. All of this deception allowed British intelligence to evaluate the effect of their falsified stories, and even to modify those stories that were not registering as believable by the Germans. German dummies. Then there were the many dummies set up by the Allies to dupe the Germans. This subterfuge refers to the fake military units that were set up in England, sometimes with fake tanks and inflatable airplanes. For example, real tanks were replaced by dummy tanks when they were moved from their holding areas. The inflatable decoys made the Germans think that the Allies had far more tanks than they actually did. This also helped mask the final preparations being made for the invasion of Normandy. These deception techniques using dummy equipment had previously been used to good effect in North Africa from 1941 to 1942, and prior to the Allied landings in Italy in 1943. As part of Fortitude South, the Allies created the fictitious 1st U.S. Army Group, FUSAG, an imaginary force based in Kent, in southeast England, and allegedly being commanded by the famously tough American military icon, General Patton. Fake radio traffic and decoy equipment, which included the aforementioned inflatable tanks and dummy landing craft, mimicked preparations typical of a large-scale invasion, and it seemed to be aimed at the Pas-de-Calais region of France, or so the Germans thought. There were also dummy or fake movements of troops, and even false attacks on German-occupied France. For example, in the months leading up to D-Day, Allied bombers attacked road and rail networks in an attempt to isolate the invasion area, but additional attacks were made on other parts of northern France. The objective was to divert the attention of the Nazi occupiers away from northwest Normandy. The theater of war. Other sub-operations abounded as part of Operation Fortitude. For example, Operation Taxable saw Britain's Royal Air Force, or RAF, No. 617 Air Squadron, drop metal strips along the French coast to confuse German radar. These strips were codenamed Window, also known as Chaff, and they proved invaluable. They were a radar countermeasure in which aircraft or other targets spread a cloud of small, thin pieces of aluminum, metallized glass fiber, or plastic throughout an area. This chaff would appear as either a cluster of primary targets on radar screens or would swamp the screen with multiple returns. Operation Taxable also included a dummy operation by the British Navy that was staged to look to Germans like an invasion convoy approaching the coast at Coutances, over 100 miles northeast of where the actual landings occurred. Operation Glimmer also involved a similar chaff-dropping exercise, this time by the 218th Squadron. 6 motor launches were also used to simulate an invasion convoy heading for Valognes in the direction of Pas-de-Calais. As already noted with the decrypted Japanese ambassador cables, this was specifically designed to make it appear as if the Allies were invading from the shortest crossing point in the channel between England and France. As part of Operation Titanic, the RAF dropped dummy parachutists over northern France to simulate an airborne invasion on the night of June 5th to 6th, and thus drew German forces away from critically important defense strategies. For this operation, a force of 40 aircraft dropped dummy parachutists to make it look like an airborne landing. 200 dummy parachutists were dropped southwest of Caen, and 200 more southwest of Dieppe in France's far northeast. These dummy parachutists were in reality lifeless cloth bags containing an explosive charge that destroyed the cloth figure by setting it on fire. This made it look like a soldier had burnt the parachute and possibly lay hidden, ready for action. There were also supposedly heated radio conversations between Allied commanders regarding supposed invasion tactics that were, in fact, wholly falsified. Their sole intent was to further entrench the German belief that the Allies were set to either launch their attack via Norway or the Pas-de-Calais area of Normandy. In fact, these dummy operations regarding troop movements and aided by radar countermeasures were carried out, even at the same time as the actual Allied landings were beginning on June 6th. All of these shenanigans encouraged the Germans to build new bunkers and to reinforce their so-called Atlantic Wall along the Côte d'Opale in the Pas-de-Calais region of Normandy. The Germans had been duped into overestimating the strength of the Allied forces in Britain, particularly in the southeast, and believed that a far larger invasion was being planned with the area around Calais as the intended target. This helped the Allies achieve the critical element of surprise and kept German reinforcements away from Normandy, both on D-Day and in the weeks that followed. The Germans were further hindered by their highly fractured and competing intelligence services, which often hampered the intelligence efforts to the point of being almost useless. Even long after the Normandy landings, Adolf Hitler retained his best troops in Pas-de-Calais, expecting an even more massive invasion at a later date. That never occurred, of course. And by then, the Allies were already making their way towards Berlin. Thanks for watching Dark Docs. Please like and subscribe to support the channel and our mission to tell cinematic stories about dark and obscure moments from history.